Join me as I dive deep into the mysteries of Roanoke Island and challenge myself to uncover its long hidden secrets. August 18th, 1590, Roanoke Island. The wind carried the briny scent of the Atlantic, mingling with the musty dampness of old wood and unwashed bodies aboard the Hopewell. The ship cut through the churning waves, its tattered sails straining against the breeze as it neared the shores of Roanoke Island. Thomas Reed stood at the bow, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the railing, his gaze locked on the dense green wall of trees that loomed ahead. The last time Englishmen had stood on this land, it had been brimming with life, a fragile yet hopeful colony, a foothold of England in the New World. But that was 3 long years ago. 3 years since Governor John White had sailed away, leaving behind his own daughter, Eleanor Dare, and his infant granddaughter, Virginia, the first English child born on American soil. 3 years since he had promised to return with supplies to ensure the survival of the over 100 men, women, and children who had entrusted their futures to these foreign shores. And now at last they had returned. But something was wrong. The island lay before them, wrapped in an unnatural stillness. The rhythmic creaking of the ship's rigging and the distant mournful cries of gulls were the only sounds to break the silence. There was no movement along the shoreline, no figures wading into the shallows to greet them, no thin trails of smoke rising from cook fires. Nothing. A knot formed in Thomas's stomach. He had prepared himself for hardship, for the grim possibility that disease or hunger had whittled the colony's numbers down to a desperate few. Perhaps the settlers had been forced to abandon their village, taking refuge among the friendly Croatan people on a neighboring island. But this emptiness, this utter and complete absence, felt wrong. It gnawed at something deep inside him, something primal. The boats were lowered into the water with a splash, rocking gently as the landing party climbed in. Oars dipped into the waves, breaking the glassy surface with rhythmic strokes as they neared the shore. Thomas could hear his heartbeat, heavy and insistent in his ears. The coastline rose to meet them, bleached driftwood, scattered shells, the gnarled roots of cypress trees clawing through the sand. The closer they drew, the more the silence pressed in around them, thick and suffocating. Even the wind seemed to hush as if the very island held its breath. Thomas swallowed, his throat dry. Something had happened here, and whatever it was, it had left no trace. The boat scraped against the sand. The men disembarked cautiously, weapons at the ready. Thomas stepped forward, his boots sinking into damp earth as he took in the abandoned settlement. The wooden palisade still stood, its jagged logs thrust into the ground like the teeth of a beast. But the gates hung open. A warning, or an invitation. Thomas's eyes swept across the entrance and stopped. Carved into the weathered wood of a post was a single word: Croatan. A sharp intake of breath came from the men behind him. They must have gone to Croatoan Island, John Ellis muttered. Thomas swallowed. The Croatan people, friendly allies of the English, lived on a neighboring island to the south. But why would the settlers abandon Roanoke without leaving more words? No distress signal, no explanation. And why did the village feel as though it had been left in a single hurried moment? The search. Weapons drawn, the men advanced into the settlement. The houses stood intact, their doors open, their interiors frozen in time. A wooden cup sat half-filled with rainwater. A chair lay toppled beside a long, cold hearth. A child's toy, a crude wooden doll, rested on the ground, its limbs splayed at an unnatural angle. "Looks like they left in a hurry," murmured Richard Bowen, one of the sailors. "Or they were taken," another replied darkly. A crow's call split the silence, making the men flinch. It perched on the peak of one of the huts, its black eyes watching them. Thomas moved forward, his eyes scanning for any sign of life. A torn parchment lay half buried in the dirt. He knelt and picked it up. The ink had faded, but he could make out the words: "They come at night." A sharp rustle sounded from the trees beyond the village. Thomas shot to his feet, hand flying to the hilt of his sword. The other men turned, muskets raised. Nothing, just trees swaying in the breeze. Still, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something, someone, was watching. A whisper drifted through the air, a voice, so faint it might have been the wind. He turned sharply toward the woods. The whisper came again, weaving through the trees like mist. It was a voice, a woman's voice. Help! The men exchanged uneasy glances. Governor White ordered us to return to the ship if we found no one, Ellis said. Thomas hesitated. His every instinct screamed to leave, to sail away and report their findings to White. But something inside him whispered stay. He took a step toward the woods. Help! The voice was clearer now. Female, English. Without another word, he pushed forward, parting the underbrush as he stepped into the shadows of the forest. The others hesitated, then followed, their footsteps cautious. The air grew thick, heavy with damp earth and something else. Something rotten. A branch snapped. The men whirled, muskets raised. Silence. Then a movement, a shadow darting between the trees. Thomas's pulse thundered. Who's there? He called. No answer. And then from the darkness she stepped forward. A woman. Her dress was torn and tattered with time and dirt. Her hair hung in wild tangles streaked with mud and leaves. Her skin was pale and sickly, and her cheekbones hollowed, but it was her eyes that sent a cold dagger of fear through Thomas's chest. They were black, deep soulless pits of darkness. Her lips parted, and in a voice not entirely her own, she whispered, Croatoan. The vanishing. A gust of wind howled through the trees, carrying the whisper with it. The woman tilted her head, her black eyes locked onto Thomas. Then, without a sound, she vanished. One moment she stood before them. The next, gone. The men stumbled back, their breath ragged. This place is cursed, Bowen rasped. We have to go. Thomas opened his mouth. To agree, to argue, he wasn't sure. But the whispers came again, louder, surrounding them. The trees, they moved. Their twisted branches stretched, shifting in the dim light. The shadows between them grew darker, taking shape. Human shapes, dozens of them, watching. The whispers turned into wails, a chorus of agony, of voices lost to time, and then the figures stepped forward. They were the settlers, or what was left of them. Skin pale as the moon, eyes black as the abyss. Their mouths opened, but no words came, only whispers rising in an eerie, haunting hymn. One of the men screamed. The others turned to flee, but the ground shifted. The earth beneath their feet cracked, splitting open into an endless void of black. Hands, cold, clawing hands, rose from the darkness, grasping, pulling. Thomas struggled, but the weight of them was too strong. The last thing he saw before the world was swallowed by shadows was the woman, the first one, the one who had whispered. She smiled, and then everything faded to nothing. Epilogue. Days later, when Governor John White arrived on Roanoke's shores, he found nothing. No bodies, no blood, no sign of struggle. Only the word Croatoan carved into the wood, and the whispers of Roanoke, drifting through the trees, waiting for the next souls to come. Thanks so much for tuning in today, friends. We hope you enjoyed our discussion. If there's anyone special you'd like us to discuss next time, please leave their name in the comments below.